Good evening, colleagues. My name's Adam Jogi, as you'll know, and I'm the Mayor and Chair of all to the virtual meeting of Haringey Council. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live and also recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. Firstly, I will start with some housekeeping rules. Only I and the members who are speaking on the particular item will be keeping their cameras and microphones on. Please can all other members and officers keep their microphones and cameras off during the meeting and only turn them on when they are speaking to present an item, ask a question or respond to a question. This is to ensure that...
Mr. Mayor, we cannot see you.
I can see you.
I can't see you.
I can see you.
Councillor Rice, I'm pretty sure I can be seen.
But not by everybody.
I can't see you.
Can't see you either.
There's a whole number of people who can't see you, unfortunately.
No, Mr. Mayor, I can't see you either. Sorry.
And I can't see you either.
Right, sorry, Aisha, could you, Mayor, please, if you spotlight him, everybody.
Okay.
That's good.
Can you see me now?
Yes, thank you very
We
much.
can see you now. Hello.
Good.
Oh,
Lucky
yeah.
you. Lucky you all.
I can't see you either, Mayor.
I hope you can hear me, Kirsten.
Yeah, that's fine. We can see you. That's
Okay.
The stream is. They can see. I don't know if you want to start from the beginning.
Secondly, I will start with some housekeeping rules. I and the members who are speaking on the particular item will be keeping their cameras and microphones on. Please can all members and officers keep their microphones and cameras off during the meeting and only turn them on when they are speaking to present an item, ask a question or to respond to a question. This is to ensure bandwidth and also to promote as much clarity as possible on the discussions. When turning your camera and microphone on, please state your name and position in the council for the benefit of viewers. Democratic Services will now share the attendance for this meeting, including the officers who are supporting the meeting tonight, for the benefit of our viewers. Do you want to get a hard copy so I can read it? Okay, we are joined by Councillor Adamu, Councillor Adjei, Councillor Ahmet, Councillor Amin, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Berryman, Councillor Bevan, Councillor Blake B, Councillor Blake M, Councillor Brabazon, Councillor Bull, Councillor Carlin, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Corley Harrison, Councillor Chandwani, Councillor Cheno, Councillor Chiankanda, Councillor Connor, Councillor Culverwell, Councillor Da Costa, Councillor Das Nevis, Councillor Davis, Councillor Demir, Councillor Dennison, Councillor Diakides, Councillor Emery, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Gunesh, Councillor Hakata, Councillor Hare, Councillor Hearn, Councillor Ibrahim, Councillor James, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Morris, Councillor Moyed, Councillor Ogieho, Councillor Poku, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Peacock, Councillor Rice, Councillor Ross, Councillor Rossetti, Councillor Say, Senate. I put in our quote for this meeting.
Can I just ask? This is Councillor Chandwani. Sorry. Can I just ask if I'm on that list because I'm meant to be between Corley Harrison and.
I said Councillor Chandwani.
Okay, I'm just checking if I'm on the written list, so I wasn't
Yep.
there.
You are. And Councillor Basu has just joined us.
No. I'm not joining. I did not hear. You didn't mention my name. I'm at the meeting.
You're here. Great. Good to see you, Darren.
Yeah.
Glad you're here. Colleagues, if throughout the meeting you lose connection and are unable to participate, please can you text the number of the officer provided to you in your calendar invite and not interrupt the meeting to indicate issues. I will only pause the meeting if democratic services indicate that we are in quorum and attempt reconnection. We need 15 members to be quorum, and democratic services will be monitoring connections throughout the meeting. We will not be using the hand icon for asking questions at this meeting, as we have many important items to get through. I will ask the chief whips of each political party to indicate if a member of their group has a question or clarification on a report, and ask that member to put forward their question. I hope you have informed your chief whip of any issues or items you wish to ask a question on. If not, we are where we are. You will have received guidance on the process of voting for this meeting in your pre-meets. This is at my discretion when we get to the motions. I will be asking the chief whips of political groups and indeed Councillor Barbara Blake to indicate their votes on amendments to the motion and indeed the substantive motion. Please can members and officers again not to use the chat function. This is to ensure we have one record of the meeting. If members do put a comment or question in the box, I will ask them to read this out for the benefit of the public. Before starting the items, please can the Democratic Services officer confirm that there are no issues with the streaming of this meeting and it is available to the public. All good?
Yeah.
All good. Now, members, you will be aware we have a very packed agenda to get through. We have deputations and external speakers for the Haringey debate item, so please can members be ready for the items when I call them. Right, item 2, apologies for absence. Chief Executive.
Mr Mayor, I have apologies for lateness from Councillor Stone and apologies for absence from Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Item 3, late items of urgent business. Chief Executive.
Mr Mayor, Mr Mayor, there are 2 late items of business which could not be available earlier and which will need to be dealt with at this meeting. Item 12, questions and written answers. The reason for lateness is that notice of questions is not requested until 8 clear days before the meeting, following which the matters raised have to be researched and replies prepared to be given at the meeting. And items the amendments to motions are not requested until 10 AM on the day of the council meeting, and we have received amendments to motion B, which have been published and distributed today as a supplementary pack.
On the matter and must withdraw from the meeting room. Details of the to make a declaration of interest are shown on the printed summons at item 4. Should any member need to make any such declaration, they should do so now by clearly stating the reasons and the nature of the interest. Members with a sensitive interest as defined in the code must declare that they have a disclosable interest, but the details of that interest need not be disclosed. Are there any members who would like to make a declaration of interest? Councillor Ibrahim.
Yes, so it's neither a prejudicial nor a pecuniary interest, but it's a personal interest, which I think is best to actually, even though it's not prejudicial or pecuniary, to declare, which is in the deputation. I have a parent who is a tenant park estate and who is affected by the pod replacement programme.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Ibrahim. Are there any other members with an interest they want to declare? No. Councillor Ibrahim, last, just put your hand down, please, if you don't mind. Item 5. Okay, first, I call the Chief Executive.
Mr Mayor, I would ask the Council to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of October 2020.
Are they agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. Item 6, Mayor's community as Mayor of Haringey. In the 6 weeks since I was elected Mayor, I've attended 34 engagements in 12 of our 19 wards and have enjoyed every single one of them. I'm aiming to get to the remaining 7 wards, Tottenham Hale, Muswell Hill, Alexandra, Stroud Green, Bruce Grove, Seven Sisters and Tottenham Green before we break for the Christmas recess. There were 2 or 3 key engagements to highlight. I was delighted to attend the annual civic service at Muswell Hill Synagogue on Saturday past. It was a joyful, hopeful and inclusive service. And I'm grateful to councillors Williams, Davis, Babazon, Ogiehor, Carlin, Weston, Carol, Connor, Chino, with the Jewish community here in Haringey next year. It was a huge honour to lead the borough's socially distanced act of remembrance. Thanks to all those who attended and remembered those who gave their lives for peace and our freedom. A special thanks to my Deputy Councillor for leading the Tottenham service, and to former mayors Jennifer and Steve Mann for representing me at a service in Highgate. Thirdly, it was a real pleasure to raise a number of green flags across the borough, and noting our members that Council Officer Joe McBride, who many members will know, and his wife have welcomed a new baby daughter. I know that members will join me in sending their warmest congratulations to Joe and his family. I'm sorry to inform members that I've received news of the passing of former councillor Liz Murphy. Mrs. Murphy served as a Labour member of this authority from May 1971 until May 1974, representing the old Town Hall ward. She unsuccessfully contested the 1974 election, following her update was abolished. I'm going to call Councillor Peacock to have a minute to very briefly pay tribute to Mrs. Murphy, and then I'll be asking all colleagues to join me in a minute's silence. Councillor Peacock.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak. You've actually taken some of what I was actually going to say. Liz Murphy was elected to Haringey Council on the 13th of May 1971, and she represented a new ward called Town Hall Ward, and winning that back for Labour because previously the Tories had taken the council in 1968. In the election of the 2nd of May 1974, she was made an alderman. She left the council in 1978 when the office of alderman was abolished. Whilst on the council, she had the roles of Vice Chair of Education and Chair of the Planning Committee. She was part of a nucleus of 3 formidable women, Nicky Harrison and Glenys Atkinson, who pushed for comprehensive education in Haringey, which they successful in achieving. This team successfully brought Pendarren Outward Bound Centre for Haringey in 1972. She was a strong advocate for early years education and was heavily involved in the national campaign for nursery education. And for now, 4 years would now start. She was also chair of governors of the then William Falter School in the late 70s and early 1980s. She was involved in the setting up of the Stroud Green Preschool Centre from 1982 to 88. She was instrumental in setting up the Haringey branch of the Socialist Education Association, along with Max Morris. She was a treasurer there until a few years ago. She will be sorely missed by the Labour Party and by members and friends who knew her.
Mr Mayor, I believe you're muted.
Sorry, just thank you, Chief Executive. I'm sure all colleagues will join me in sending our warmest and deepest condolences to Mrs. Murphy's family, and I hope all members will now join me in a minute's silence for Liz Murphy. Thank you very much, colleagues. Item 7, report of the Chief Executive. I call the Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, I have no items to report.
Thank you. Item 8, I call on the Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Mayor, I too have no items to report.
Thank you. Item 9. As part of this item, we have 2 committee reports to consider. The first report is from the Regulatory Committee, which is seeking agreement to the Statement of Licensing Policy, and the second report is from the Corporate Committee, which contains the Treasury Management Outturn Report, considered at the July committee meeting for noting. I'll first call on Councillor Williams of the Regulatory Committee to introduce her report. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before moving the recommendation in my council report, I would like to highlight a further required change to the updated Statement of Licensing Policy at Appendix 4. And this is the updated version of the policy which Council are being asked to agree. We propose, Regulatory Committee members propose deleting the of the paragraph into data in their lives. Although the figures do not show whether alcohol was a factor, this can often be the case. I move that we agree the recommendations at page 11 of the Council Pack, 3.1 and 3.2, subject to this change.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I now call Councillor Adamu to second the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second this change, the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adamu. I will now pause for the Chief Whips to indicate if any of their members have questions on the report, and also for the independent member to indicate any questions. Are there any questions from the Whips?
No questions.
Councillor Barbara Blake?
No, I have no questions.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to the vote. Unless I hear any dissent, I will assume that the recommendations are agreed. This is in accordance with Council Standing Order 17.3. No dissent. Are the recommendations set out at page 11 of the main pack agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Councillor Williams. Amendment passed. I'll now call on Councillor Diakhides, Chair of the Corporate Committee. Could you please turned on?
Yes.
And over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the outcome for our Treasury Management for last year. You know that basically have met all our requirements according to the appropriate procedures. There's been no crisis. We have increased our resources for capital investments in accordance with our plans, and there is some leeway for the future for further investments if they are needed. So it sounds all okay. Also, though, point out that this was until the March of this year Brexit debacle, which will cause us no doubt huge problems. And therefore, it is important that this year we are looking at it in more detail. And on that, I would like to draw attention to the fact as well that a number of authorities, the latest being Croydon, have been caught on that one and being criticized by those who are checking constantly what's going on. And in that sense, although I'm sure some members wouldn't have found the time to read the report, I would like to urge people to try to read it and to ask questions and clarifications from the office myself. And this Thursday, for the new members, it's open to everybody to actually get an introduction to Treasury Management as well as our audit program.
Councillor, thank you,
Councillor.
Councillor.
Thank you.
I'll now pause for Chief Whips of both groups and Councillor Barbara Blake to indicate if there are any questions on this report. Are there any questions? I don't believe there are.
No.
No.
No
Councillor
questions.
Blake?
No.
No. Councillor Rice? Is the report is the report noted?
Noted, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Great. Item 10. As part of this item, I have received a petition here in hard copy, like old times, with 374 signatures and a deputation from Parkside Malvern Residents Association. The petition calls for a full assessment of the need for traffic calming and an evidence-based examination of the case for a vehicle weight reduction on Hornsey Park Road, N8. I have also received a deputation from Sarah Klimkew on behalf of leaseholders on Gladstone Avenue on the proposed major works in Knoll Park. Keeping in mind Council Standing Order 11.3 and the need to complete the business on the agenda, I'm proposing we spend a total of 20 minutes on deputations instead of the 30. There will still be the full 5 minutes to introduce these items by the deputies, and so residents won't be penalised. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Great. In accordance with Council Standing Order 12.1, I'm accepting the petition. I now call on Marcus Ballard and Vincent Egger. Please can you turn on your microphones and your cameras and make your representations to the meeting. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is Marcus Ballard, and Vincent and I will answer questions afterwards if you have any. Hornsey Park Road is no ordinary road. I'm sure most of you have used it, but it is suffering from a long-standing failure to plan strategically, even when the resources and the opportunities have existed. Worse, there has been a failure to observe, listen and deliver on promises made to the community. In more than 20 years, there's been no strategic approach to reconciling the pressures for growth with environmental concerns and the community's right to live safely and healthily and breathe fresh air, raise our families and look after the most vulnerable. So we're asking you, our councillors, to lead in helping address this failing and help create the integrated, socially just community we need. We very much support the regeneration of Wood Green, but it shouldn't be. The background is 50 years ago, the roads were reconfigured and Hornsey Park Road was connected in a way that had never been planned. Maze Road was closed and we effectively became a bypass for the High Road. But a new road was promised, but ultimately that new road was cancelled in 1996. But that was at the same time as the Heartlands regeneration plans were first published, and they introduced a new link road. At the time, Hornsey Park Road, I should say, by the council's own figures, Hornsey Park Road was carrying 27,500 vehicles a day, while the High Road was only carrying 30,000, yet the High Road is the A Road, the main road. Hornsey Park Road was described in the strategic documents at the beginning of Heartlands as inhospitable, dominated by parked cars and fast-moving traffic. This is the result of the temporary diversion and failure to build the link road. The documents also said it was unwillingly acting as a relief road for traffic congestion, and as a result, is it's dangerous, noisy, and polluted. This not only produces an unpleasant environment for residents, but also acts to sever the Heartlands from the site, the Heartland site from the town centre. The road was designed as a residential road only, and that observation remains true to this day. You need to be connected well and not severed by this bypass road. The High Road's since been narrowed, so there's less space for traffic on the main A Road, and there's obviously been work carried out on the High Road, but nothing has been done of any substance on Hornsey Park Road. It's desperately in need of repair, and traffic calming and being put into an order that makes it a pleasant environment for the 21st century. There are many accidents, yet they go unrecorded because the police and the council only record accidents where people are injured. There was many of you will remember the single regeneration budget. We hoped for much, but ultimately it delivered nothing to improve the environment. It really just enabled more traffic to flow. The Mary Noyner Road Planning Commission promised to redistribute traffic, sharing it equally with across Hornsey Park Road and the new road, but that didn't happen. In 2009, some of you may remember that we petitioned the council then. We met the Director of Sustainability rather than Claire Cover. She couldn't make it, but we were told there were other priorities. That October, we demonstrated in the streets with a young Alan Strickland and Karen Jennings, the prospective Labour parliamentary candidate. We were successful in getting traffic to use Mary Noyner Road on that one morning, but things quickly reverted. Many more heavy vehicles. We don't see the same traffic in other parts of the borough, yet it's going uncommented on and unnoticed in Hornsey Park Road. But most desperate for us is we see the area action plan and the site allocations plan showing the densification and intensification of our area, and yet the highways and strategic transport planning is not going in to the area. And even most recently, we've seen the mayor open, I think it was the mayor, maybe a cabinet member, open the local park, but there's no way of getting across the road into the local park and playground. And we've seen the consultation this week for the African Cultural Centre published or consulted on, and it shows the promised improvement at the south end of Hornsey Park Road not being carried out. So we need a whole new approach, and we're asking for your help in delivering that from the top down, because through officers and regeneration and transport
thank
teams,
you, Marcus.
They're very busy, but they're not getting it done. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
That's 5 minutes and 12 seconds, so I was a little bit lenient with myself. Okay, so there's a list of questions, and in accordance with Council Standing Order 11.9, I call on Councillor Cast to ask a question.
And that's the incredibly important statistics and facts that you've shared with the council here. Obviously, in terms of government interventions and plans for managing traffic, are the kind of interventions that you are hoping for on Hornsey Park Road?
I think number one is the fair distribution of traffic between the three roads, so or 3+1, because we could include Alexandra Palace Way, which naturally takes traffic around the area. So some traffic for the high road, obviously Hornsey Park Road, Mary Noyner Road in particular. So those are the roads that we'd like to see share the traffic. We'd like to see the HGVs off Hornsey Park Road because it's simply not fit to take such heavy vehicles. You know, whether it's vibration, whether it's their proximity to bedrooms and living rooms, whether it's the poor condition of the housing. It wasn't well built at the time, and my neighbour Vincent is presently trying to repair his house, so he knows exactly the damage that's been caused through probably 20-30 years of traffic, but a lot recently. So, a lorry a heavy string.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Marcus. At a meeting of the Planning Committee earlier this year for the Haringey Heartlands development, there was a lengthy discussion around the lack of supporting road infrastructure for the area and how dangerous it is. Perhaps you could just let us know how much additional traffic you think is going to be coming from the Heartlands development, and if Haringey Council don't make an intervention now to the road network, what the expectation is for further volumes of traffic in the area.
I think, speaking personally, I think the threat from an increase of traffic is across the borough and between boroughs. Haringey Heartlands is a low car ownership, if not car-free neighbourhood, and I think the New River and Heartlands and generally the work of the council has been successful in getting across. We've obviously got roads who need to travel into or out of London, and the bus network is good, you know, the so-called people. And yet there is more traffic, and it's serving London's economy, and it's serving neighbouring boroughs. You know, I've seen fewer parked cars in our roads as car ownership, I think, is reducing, and yet there is a desire from people living outside of the immediate area to drive to Wood Green, or there are people, we've certainly seen it through the COVID. Heights of traffic and congestion. So I think locally you're doing the right thing, but it's, you know, it's the sort of existential threat that has to be planned for. So number one, keep the traffic on the main roads if you can, but try and deal with it there, you know, to reduce it there.
Thank you.
See your hand up.
Yes, I would like to add to Marcus' statement, as I'm a direct resident of Hornsey Park Road, that we definitely see an increase of traffic, especially in HGVs, due to the construction. So as Mary Neuner Road has been closed through the entire phase 1 or 2 and 3 of the Heartlands estate, all construction traffic, and that is all the Arctic lorries, 40 tons, the heavy concrete lorries, steel deliveries, everything goes through Hornsey Park Road. We have sometimes an HGV basically every minute or two, which makes houses shake, radiators rattle. This road was built in the 1964 horse carriages, and is definitely not suitable for this heavy load traffic that is currently passing through an incredible amount of, We have, when collecting signatures, received many reports of people who cannot sleep at night because of the traffic, just are having cramps, whose children are suffering because they can also not at night. So
To interrupt, but perhaps you can expand on your thoughts in the answer to the next question. I'm just mindful of time, and there's another question from Councillor Moyed. So, Councillor Moyed, do you want to ask your question? Perhaps, Vincent, you can come back to.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to thank Marcus and Vincent for the deputation. Hornsey Park Road is a very important road in Knoll Park. You know, it runs across the length of the Knoll Park ward, connecting Wood Green with Turnpike Lane. And I've been down there with Vincent and just to see their proposals. And let's just say, because your recent proposal was to have a zebra crossing, let's say that that is in the pipeline. What would be the one thing that would make a major difference to the lives of residents? I know you've talked about a range of different things, but if you could just focus on one thing that we could deliver, that would make a huge difference.
I think that would be weight restriction and traffic calming.
I'd agree.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, folks. Thanks very much. Now, I'm going to go to the cabinet member to respond to the deputation, and he does have 3 minutes on the dot. Cabinet member.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very, very much, Marcus and Vincent, for coming here today. I do have a prepared response to read you, but I don't think I'm going to do that because I don't think it would really be fair. I don't think it addresses what you've come here today. And what I'd really like to say to you actually is that I agree with you. I mean, I lived on the Haringey ladder for many years. You know, Wood Green was my main shopping area. I used to cycle to get there. I'm fully aware of, you know, it's been an overly trafficked route for a number of years, and something needs to be done about it. Now, what I want to do, because I'm quite new in this role, and I'm going and I'm meeting groups of residents like yours. I'm also cabinet member for planning, actually, which also has a fair amount of importance in what you're asking. So I'd really like to meet you. So I'd like to arrange a time over the next week or so where we can get together. Maybe just one of you and me can meet in the streets, and we can have a look at what you want. Obviously, we've got the restrictions. What I do have to say, there were some quite specific asks. And you asked for a crossing, which I believe we've got an agreement now in principle with the developer St William to deliver the crossing by amending the Section 278 agreement. They've already submitted drawings to us. They're with the highways team to make comments, and transport planning following that is going to work with the developer and with you guys to agree a plan to implement the zebra crossing, and that's going to be paid for from savings from the Section 278 bond deposit sum. On the regen works, this actually isn't in my portfolio, but on the regen works to the corner, they're actually in 2 phases, and we've literally this month got funding to complete the scheme and do the 2nd phase. So I don't have much more in detail on that, but I can certainly find out and I can discuss that with you in detail when we meet. But ultimately, I know you have contacted me, and I'm going to get back to you, and hopefully we can arrange a date over the next week or so, and we can discuss in detail. What I do know is that route is a through route on a long rat run that includes Whiteman Road and other areas, and we've got certain elements in our street space plan that might have some beneficial effect, but I can discuss that in detail when we meet, hopefully. I think I'm out of time anyway, but thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Right. 3 seconds in, so well done. And just a quick reminder to all here, please keep your mics off. That sounded like Guy Fawkes' night had come round again a moment ago, so please be mindful of that.
That was unavoidable. It was actually me while I was speaking, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. You're having a fireworks party or something. Thank you for your representations, Vincent and Marcus, and for joining the meeting tonight. I believe that Democratic Services have sent you the web link for this meeting, and so you can continue watching the meeting as a public viewer. If in real time, you'd be invited up to the gallery if you so wish, but otherwise, thank you very much, and there are some outcomes there for you to pick up with the cabinet members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we come to the second deputation from Sarah Klimkew, who is attending tonight's meeting with Mr. Michael Jones. Miss Klimkew and Mr. Jones, please can you turn on your microphones and your cameras and make your deputations, your representations to the council. You similarly have 5 minutes. Sarah and Michael, over to you.
Okay, hi. I live in Knoll Park with my partner, Michael Keever, and Etta, our 1-year-old daughter. On the 22nd of September, we received Section 20 notice from Haringey Council for £108,450. A notice of intention to carry out major work to our home with estimated and inflated costs. We must wait a number of years to fully know the final impact when we will receive a final bill, with no guarantee that it won't be even higher. I'm speaking on behalf of over 30 leaseholders from Gladstone Avenue who also received notices for works of up to £120,000. We're not confused, we're terrified. We live in constant fear that we will lose our homes or be sunk into a lifetime of debt. We're ordinary people, not bankers or multimillionaires. Some of us are families with young children. Some of us are retired. Some of us are NHS workers. Many of us have already been financially impacted by the pandemic through furlough, lost work and redundancies. The coming years of austerity will only make this worse. We oppose the planned works. We believe the costs are wholly unreasonable, and we argue the necessity of key aspects of the proposal. At the heart of these works is the replacement of the prefabricated pods, temporary bathroom blocks installed in the early 70s, which had a projected life of 15 years. Council and Homes of Haringey have neglected our flats. The pods are damp and drafty, they contain asbestos, and they've fallen into disrepair. The pods should have been removed 30 years ago. The proposal is a quick fix solution to replace the pods with more pods. It's not the best option, certainly not the most sustainable one, and it does not deliver value for money. There is another way. An early estimate for the cost of removal and replacement was £12,500 for a single pod. By 2015, it was £25,000. By September 2020, the average had doubled again for over £50,000. We only learned about the full extent of the works and the excessive life-changing costs with September's Section 20 notices sent out alongside a mistaken demand for payment. The estimates are not based on individual surveys, yet the proposals involve replacing whole roofs, all the windows, external doors. Homes for Haringey have not justified why they believe we need all of these works, nor how they arrived at these figures. The contractor is Haringey, a private multinational conglomerate with a record of safety issues and of failures to deliver on council contracts. Haringey's high estimates for this proposal will bring them vast profits, and its tenants through the housing revenue account and leaseholders who will be paying. Many of you have spoken out publicly against ordinary people having to pay out for the sake of inflated private profit, but that is what is happening here. The report for these works was due to be presented to the Cabinet on October 13th before the consultation deadline. Consultation is not a tick box exercise. It is, according to Council's own charter, a dialogue. Yet the timings suggest that Homes for Haringey never intended to truly listen to our views. We've still not received any answers to our questions. And if the contract is signed on December 8th, what incentive remains for driving down costs? How independent will the full surveys on our homes be? Who will decide what work is necessary, especially if there's profit to be made? There's no denying a solution to the pods is needed, not just for leaseholders, but for council tenants too. They deserve decent homes. Many have offered their support and are equally shocked. We recognise that as leaseholders, we have a responsibility to contribute towards reasonable costs, but the buildings are part of the council's housing stock. So we ask that council also contribute and explore any and every alternative funding path to achieve this. The only response to our concerns has been talk of payment plans echoed in a meeting with council leader, but this does not address the key issue. The costs are simply too high. Debt does not magically go away by spreading it across a longer length of time or deferring it until the property is sold. Only a significant reduction in costs will save us from financial ruin. So we have three clear asks, which is 1, to pause and do everything in your power to bring down the costs and consider removing the additional works and focusing on the issue of the pod. 2, scrap the current proposal to replace the pod with another pod and offer alternative viable options. And 3, develop a separate programme for blocks containing leaseholder properties done in full consultation with leaseholders to ensure best value for money. The stress at this time of pandemic is having an unbearable effect on our mental health. We already face financial pressures such that many of us have no choice but to sell, yet the potential debts attached to our homes make that impossible. We're trapped. It cannot be a Labour council's intention to make ordinary residents homeless or bankrupt or force them to sell their homes, surely. We ask that you engage with us fully before making decisions that will cause lifelong poverty and have a catastrophic impact on the life chances of our families, of our children, of my daughter. Thank you.
Bang on
You're
time.
muted, Adam.
Yes, no, I'm here. Can you hear me? And
Yes.
you hear? Yes, great. Thanks, Isidoros. Thank you, Sarah. Now, in accordance with Council Standing Order 11.9, I'm going to call on the councillors who've indicated they have a question. Now, I'll first come to Councillor Corley-Harrison. Do you have a question, or do any of the Liberals have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Thank you for the deputation, Sarah. I'm just wondering what dialogue you have received from Homes for Haringey in respect to individually looking at what each leaseholder would like to do to replace the pods, for example, rebuild with brick or bring them into the house instead, and whether you have been given any opportunity to put forward your own contractors rather than having to use NG.
Thank you. I'd like to answer that, and then I might hand over to Mike, who's also a leaseholder on Gladstone Avenue. We haven't really had any meaningful consultation at this point. In fact, the first that we learned about the costs was in September when we received the notices. We believe there are alternatives. For about 5 years, I've been trying to, 5 years that I've lived in the flat, I've been trying to engage Homes for Haringey with in a dialogue about an alternative option to the pods. Now, when I bought my flat back in 2015, I was told that the work was going to be £12,500, and then it went up to £25,000. And I suggested to Homes for Haringey that to opt out of having a pod and to instead install to remove the pod and install a bathroom within the brick structure. And I know that other leaseholders have had issues trying to engage Homes for Haringey in any sort of meaningful consultation. It does appear that Homes for Haringey are using a qualifying long-term agreement, which essentially bypasses any meaningful consultation. It does mean that then we are not allowed to even offer up any estimates or alternatives at this point. So essentially, these costs are just being pushed onto us, and that's a real concern, especially as they are so they're so extreme. We're not actually allowed to obtain any independent quotes, and they are actually bypassing our rights under Section 20 notice. I wonder if Mike has anything else to add to that point.
Yeah, on the subject of qualifying long-term agreements, this is a problem for us as leaseholders. We're just ordinary people. We don't understand all these rules, and I believe we are allowed to propose our own contractors when these agreements were first entered into. But how do we know how to go about that? And at that stage, we don't actually know what the works are covering. When they start one of these agreements, we have no idea what's planned further down the road. So how can we suggest an alternative contractor at that stage? As for being offered alternatives, we know that Homes for Haringey have looked into all sorts of alternatives across the years, but none of these have been offered to us. There was originally 10 years ago, they looked at the possibility of a brick-built extension, which is something a lot of us would still like. Even tenants have asked for this, but we're not being offered that now.
Thank you both. That's very disappointing to hear.
Okay, call Councillor Ahmet.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sarah and Michael, for putting across your case so well. However, I'm sorry that you've had to do so and have had to have a crash course in council processes. This is due to go to Cabinet in December now. It was originally October, it's now December. So what I want to hear from you is what consultation has happened, and of course there's the legal consultation, but aside from that, what meetings have you had in the run-up, and as a next step, because you did meet with the leader, I believe it was last week or the week before, what meetings will happen before that report is presented to Cabinet in December?
In terms of meetings, we had the main one was in July, which we had with Homes for Haringey and with NG, and that's when they talked about they've sort of renamed the pods as a precision engineered extension. It is still essentially a pod, and no alternative options. And that's when they also started telling us that there would be additional works on top of the pod work. We didn't receive, well, we asked them how much the cost would be, and they couldn't tell us, and this was in July. And then, of course, in September, we received the notice. We obviously were really alarmed, as you would be, when you receive a letter through the post asking, you know, saying that you're going to need to pay this money at some point in the future. And we contacted lots of councillors, and actually Sean McLaughlin, who is the managing director of Homes for Haringey, came to our door. They did some doorstep knocking with Councillor Amina Ibrahim and another housing officer. And it was at that point that we realised that the only consultation or the only sort of exploration of options was going to be to sort of pursue payment. And we were told that they were going to offer generous payment plans. They would look at maybe taking some ownership of our flats, or if we come to sell, then they would take the money at that point, or they would offer us 25 years to pay it back, which essentially is still another mortgage. And it was, of course, it was really worrying. At this point, we then put in our observation letters, which is a legal document where we are able to ask questions, and we haven't had any response from that. We did have a meeting with leader Joseph and also Sean McLaughlin, and it was the same information was sort of passed on to us about payment plans, generous payment plans, and no other sort of conversation about alternative options, and whether or not we even think that the work really needs to be done. We don't actually believe the work needs to be done, certainly not the additional work, and we don't believe that the pod work is the right way to go, sort of replacing a pod for a pod. We received an email the other day to say that there was a delay getting the responses to our observation letters, so we still haven't got any answers. We've had no other sort of reach out from Homes for Haringey, so there's no plans for any extra meetings or conversations or dialogue to sort of continue to explore this further. And I'll hand over to Mike if he wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, can I just add? We were told by Homes for Haringey that the responses to observations would be up to 10 days late. That puts us, I think, only about 2 weeks before Cabinet due to make a decision. There are no meetings planned, so the answers that we get, if we indeed get the answers we're looking for, we don't really have much opportunity to then discuss those further. This isn't really a dialogue if only one side is speaking or being listened to, rather. And it gives us an idea of how bad the communication process is, that we were sending observation letters which were 9-10 pages long with dozens and dozens of points and questions, things we don't yet know and which we still don't know at this stage. And that is an appalling indication of just how bad the communication is.
Okay, I had one indication from Councillor Babazon, but it must only be one sentence because we are running over. So Councillor Babazon, one sentence.
It really is just a clarification, if I might. You've bought your flats with your eyes open. So can you just be clear for us as councillors and so on that you're not objecting to the principle as leaseholders of paying your fair share? It's the issue, if I've understood it correctly, about consultation, about how costs have risen and the process generally. Can you just confirm that my understanding is correct? Thank you.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Thank you, Sarah and Michael. I'll now call on the council leader to respond to the deputation, and he has up to 3 minutes. Councillor Ejiofor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might need an extra few moments on top of that because I did want to first and foremost. I think it's important to say that if we were going to start this process again, there are many things that we should learn from in terms of the ways that residents, leaseholders have been communicated with. I think we can certainly learn to do things better and do things differently. And I have to say that I did read the Section 20 notice which went out to residents, and I can understand and empathise with your shock, horror, and concern. So I'm sorry about that. There was a letter obviously sent back which sought to clarify what the issues were there. I'm also sorry for the delay that you've been advised of from your observation letters. I wasn't aware that there had been a delay, and now I am aware that there's been a delay. I will seek to do what I can to expedite your responses to that. You mentioned a couple of key things. It had to be said about the additional work that's been spoken about, right? Every property on the estate is unique, right? And it's been made clear that everybody needs to have a bespoke survey done of their property, and from that, whatever work is perceived to be necessary will be done. We're not doing work that's not necessary, right? That's one of the things I've said before, and it's been made explicitly clear. But there is a situation that if we are doing work on the property, and at some time work will be needed to be done to the property, it would make sense to do it all at the same time, all right? The second thing you talked about was about the pod itself. The pod is the pods that are on there at the moment had a life expectancy of 15 years. The pods that we're proposing to put on now have a life expectancy of 60 years, and more likely than not, they'll outlast many of us who are sitting around this table seeking to make that particular decision. And there is a clear issue there about if we were the pod can be replaced in a day. If you're going to have a brick-built extension, that's effectively going to mean 3 months worth of no toilet, no bathroom. And this was perceived to be a quicker solution and a better solution to get a pod that is guaranteed to be there for 60 years and to get it put in place in a day. I do hear very much the concerns that residents have about the issue around payments, right? And it's very difficult not to be able to, and not to understand your concerns, whilst at the same time I'm hoping that you take aboard the fact that we have to get a solution that works, and that we cannot subsidize the repairs using the money from tenants. So we are looking at whether there are other options, whether there are other alternatives, whether there is a plan C. But our objective is not to move anybody out from their homes. Our objective is to find a way that everybody can remain in the home that they love. But the issue around how it gets paid for is still not resolved. Well, obviously, we're going to come and have a discussion at Cabinet, and we're supposed to be talking to all of the leaseholders and understanding what your circumstances are. If we can find a way to get money from the government or from another source to seek to supplement the costs, we will. But at the same time, we can't promise that that's going to be doable or that's going to be deliverable. I would hope that we get to a situation whereby sometime before we get to Cabinet, that we can have a conversation with leaseholders, with officers, just to have some so I can get greater understanding about what your concerns are. I think that where we are at the moment is that this is a decision that should have been taken many years ago. Right, well, this council should have replaced the pods maybe 20 years ago. The fact that we're doing this thing now is probably because the pods are not just at the end of their useful life, but they're actively now sort of unsafe. Now, did I say maybe unsafe wasn't the word that I wanted, but that they need replacing sooner rather than later. That's what we're seeking to do now. As I said, it's important to point out they're not a quick fix. They're guaranteed to last for 60 years. The expectation is that they'll be delivered to a higher quality than the brick build extension. But really, we need to consult further with leaseholders, which we hope we'll be able to do in the forthcoming few weeks.
Thank you, Leader. Sarah, Michael, thank you for coming and for making your representations tonight. And as I indicated to the two previous guest speakers, the link's been sent through. So if you are minded to stay and watch, please do so. But otherwise, thank you very much indeed for coming. Right, colleagues, we are a little bit behind schedule, and I'm getting periodic reminders from officers to try and speed things up. So as is their responsibility and duty. So I will endeavour to do so. Now, item 11, the Haringey debate. I just want to remind members that this debate will be introduced by Councillor Connor, who will introduce the item. The guest speakers will have up to 10 minutes in total to introduce the topic and provide information to members. There will follow a short debate, short being the operative word, with a response from the Cabinet member and a closing statement by Councillor Connor. Councillor Connor, I hope you're there. I hope your mic and camera are ready to go, and I call on you to introduce the debate. You have 3 minutes, or up to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but apologies, I thought I had 5 minutes. Can I just clarify that I have 5 minutes?
It's 3. Without dropping anybody in it, the Chief Whip should have communicated that to you post the pre-meet earlier tonight. We've had to curtail the agenda somewhat, so it's 3 minutes for you, unfortunately.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'll just say thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome everyone here tonight to the Haringey debate, mental health during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. I had a lot of statistics to give everyone tonight about the serious situation, about the rising mental health stresses on our local residents across the board. I'm going to cut that part of the speech because the bit that I really want to concentrate in on tonight is actually the people that are working so hard in our local communities, running the voluntary organisations, the small groups, the ones that are really addressing the needs across the board, whether it be through running food banks, where they then also speak to people about housing issues, loneliness, isolation, whether it's another organisation that addresses physical needs and then has those discussions around mental health needs. These are really key and critical parts of our community, and I really just wanted everyone here tonight to hear from them. So I'm going to do a brief introduction on each of their organisations, and then I'm going to pass over to them to actually give you a lot more information and insight into what their experiences are. So Vas is a community coordinator at the Bridge Renewal Trust. She works alongside other voluntary groups and understands the unique work they bring to a variety of communities. Vas also works alongside our commissioners and the council to ensure that both the council and other partners such as the CCG can provide tailored support. Sonia runs For You Two Sew Together, which is a women's creative project. This project began 12 months ago, delivering weekly workshop crafts to residents. Service users may be unemployed, experience isolation and loneliness, also have physical and mental health conditions, including anxiety, low mood and depression. This innovative project allows a safe space for women to come together and practice a skill. They also offer counselling and support in a positive environment, reaching women who wouldn't necessarily access those services. Shasama is here tonight and being supported by Vas and runs the Dalmar charity established in 2008 and based in Tottenham. They aim to support children, mothers and families, mainly from Somalia and Ethiopia. Dalmar serves its community through training, skills development and social enterprise. The Somali community has significant need for support. There is considerable need to tackle health and mental health disparities, provide children and family support, befriending, advocacy, counselling and safeguarding. This grassroots organisation can reach those who would otherwise not access these services they really need. Raj runs a community hub previously known as the Asian Centre. This centre is a user-led community organisation with over 1,400 active members. They provide a wide range of services from health and wellbeing, social welfare, art, education, IT and lunch clubs. They also offer information, advice and signposting surgeries for all members of their community, regardless of race, culture or ethnicity. This community organisation has recognised a real need for providing care support. They are spreading health messages to different ethnic communities in accessible languages in appropriate ways. And finally, we're going to be hearing from Martin.
who runs the People's Christian Fellowship. The church is situated on Broad Lane in the heart of Tottenham Green Ward. They provide crucial support for up to 120 families each week through their food bank. Through the food bank, other services naturally grow, including befriending and supporting vulnerable and isolated residents. They work in a cross-cultural, multi-generational and diverse communities. Their great strength is being a trusted part of the community who can offer advice and support in a safe environment. So we'll now welcome and hear from each of these vital organisations. And I'd really like you to all give a big hand to those who can't really, but to Vas. So over to you, Vas, first, and then she's going to introduce the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Connor. Okay. Vas, you've got 2 minutes.
Lovely. Hello and good evening. Hello, I'm Vaz. I'm the Community Development Manager for Health, Mental Health and Wellbeing with the Bridge Renewal Trust. And I've actually got great pleasure in having these organisations attend this evening. We work with capacity building, community voluntary sector organisations, housing associations and faith-based organisations through the Haringey Wellbeing Network. We also work in collaboration with Barnet Enfield Haringey Mental Health Services, the CCG, the local authority, the safeguarding teams. The work we do with the Bridge Renewal Trust with community voluntary sector organisations is around capacity building, fundraising support, training, but also around asset development and management. The work also leads on to sustainable approaches where we actually join up different projects and partnership working. So over the last 8-9 months, and certainly throughout the whole of the COVID lockdown, we've actually found that community voluntary sector organisations were very, very quick to mobilise local resources on the ground with grassroots communities. And that was a very, very valuable asset very early on in the pandemic, and is actually also proving to be an incredibly valuable asset now. We support and have supported over the last 11 months at least 50 organisations in terms of capacity building through the bridge, and we've also supported some of the hardest to reach communities. So first of all, of the speakers we have this evening, I would like to welcome Sonia, please, For You Two Sewn Together.
Okay, thank you. My camera's off, I'm afraid, it's a bit blurred. Hello, I'm Sonia from For You Two News Mag. We're a community magazine providing a platform to promote local services, businesses, events, activities right across Haringey. We also run a community project called Sewn Together, and it's all about empowering creative communities for BAME women. So far, we've engaged over 90 women. The project began 12 months ago, delivering weekly crafting workshops, bookbinding, embroidery, pattern cutting to local residents, many unemployed, isolated, facing loneliness and living in low-income families. Some have diagnosed physical or mental health conditions. Due to COVID-19, we moved the project online, continuing to support individuals during these uncertain times. Unfortunately, 46% of our participants remained excluded due to limited digital and Wi-Fi IT access. Haringey Giving Grant enabled us to deliver additional crafting workshop plus offer health and wellbeing advice. Participants shared their concerns around their mental health due to lockdown and social distancing, which included high levels of anxiety, low mood, fear and bereavement, with shielders requesting befriending and telephone support. Weekly group counselling sessions, referrals and signposting to local services provided a platform for individuals to address other issues. The risk of mental health problems is higher for all of us during these times, and we feel it would be really fantastic if we had accessible, tailored counselling services at a local level, and we also feel that if we could get a programme together for people donate electronic equipment, phones, laptops, computers, that most of us have got sitting around our homes or close premises so that we can get individuals digitally engaged. Thank you. Over to Vaz.
Thank you, Sonia. We aren't able to have Shamsa Adan here with us today from the Dalmar organisation, so I'd like to say a few words, please, on behalf of Dalmar, which is a Somali organisation. It's a cultural organisation supporting children and families. It works with over 120 people every week. And
Sorry, Baz.
Sorry?
Put your camera on for us, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Sorry, apologies. Dalmar actually works with some of the most isolated and excluded communities within the local authority. The Somali community, and various reports have been published over the years around health inequalities and life chances and comorbidities, specifically affecting communities like the Somali population. Dalmar is based at the Selby Centre, and it works with a broad cross-section of communities from Somalia and Ethiopia, specifically looking at capacity building and looking at developing skills and training, enabling parents to access support for children with special needs, particularly autism, but also looking at raising awareness and learning around safeguarding, domestic violence, coercive control, anxiety, depression, and various mental health issues. Dalmar is currently working on projects around PPE, sewing skills, and bringing communities together around social enterprise so that they can actually work in the COVID context, but actually use skills and sewing and training to bring communities together virtually, but also to be of service during the pandemic when it comes to producing PPE. Some of the biggest challenges facing the Somali community and Dalmar specifically at the moment are actually around day-to-day operational costs and resourcing for facilities. The other challenges are actually about being able to people phone lines, because the requests and the requirements for information, advice, guidance, support, advocacy, befriending, challenging isolation, and often actually crisis point telephone calls are not being fielded because of staffing and resource issues. So one of the biggest challenges is staffing and resourcing. The second is actually access to services for children with disabilities, specifically children with autism, where evening, after school and weekend provision is not available at the moment and hasn't been for a while, leaving lots of carers and parents with very little opportunity for respite. Dalmar is a very motivated organisation. It's very active on social media, and they happen to get health messaging, mental health messaging out amongst the community in a very, very effective way and in a very, very quick way. So definitely an organisation which is an asset, and I'm hoping that it will be on the map and on the radar when it comes to sharing health messages, information, working in partnership with statutory and health providers. Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Raj from the Community Hub, who the Community Hub, sorry, was previously known as the Asian Centre. Raj, over to you.
Yeah, hello there. Can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. My name is Raj. I speak on behalf of Community Hub, previously known as Asian Centre. Our services are now open to all communities in Haringey, but we still provide targeted culture-specific services to address the needs of the South Asian communities, i.e. we provide health, advocacy, well-being, and daycare opportunities which are accessible to people in Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, and Bengali. We have, like my colleagues say, 1,400 members and service users. In terms of mental health and well-being, activities include yoga, exercise through Bollywood, and music and dance classes, Mum's Kitchen, social and community interaction through cultural activities like Eid, Diwali, International Women's Days are some of the examples. The daycare is used by 15 service users current at the present. We have a capacity for 25 service users. We are aiming to increase this capacity and have secured funds of 33,000 from City Bridge to improve and adapt our buildings to ensure that the building is COVID safe and more importantly is dementia friendly. We provide transport, in-house transport. The most recent work we have done is around dementia awareness in the South Asian community. This was funded by Race Equality Unit. We have successfully managed to deliver an online conference which was attended by 62 people. Many of them were carers, family members, and people living with dementia. This was done in partnership with, obviously, voluntary sector, with VAS help, and Commissioners Group took part in it, and the London Borough of Haringey also took part in it, and other community organizations. Following this group, we have now running a virtual singing group aimed at involving people living with dementia within the South Asian community. We have also managed to encourage 30 members of South Asian community to become dementia friends with Alzheimer's Society. We have a target of 100 people to become dementia friends. We are now seeking additional funding and partnership work in improving services to our aging population. In summary, my councillor chair, what we should not forget, in summary, we all know that early intervention and prevention is the key to better outcome for anyone with the mental health difficulties. But councillors, what we should not forget is that Black and Asian volunteer sector and volunteer sector in general has a key role in playing to improve the quality of life for its member and its local community. The medical model, which is important, but it needs to work in partnership with its local community around our social model. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me. Thanks a lot and giving me an opportunity to express my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. We come to our final speaker for this evening. I'd like to introduce Martin Finnegan, please, from the People's Christian Fellowship. Martin?
Thanks very much, Vaz. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll just keep it very brief. I'll start the presentation with a small story. And one evening after the food bank was closed, Natalie, one of the food bank coordinators and one of the trustees, encountered a black woman outside the church. The woman expressed that she was a pensioner and her husband, being a diabetic, was partially blind. She highlighted her frustration in not being able to work because she had to look after her husband, and her distress was further compounded by the death of her son-in-law, who had committed suicide earlier on that year. She was torn between supporting her daughter and grandchild and her husband, who was blind. In compassion, Natalie reopened the church building and bagged as much food as the woman could carry. Upon receiving the food, the woman was in a flood of tears, as she expressed that she was on her way to Lidl with £5 in her pocket to feed her and her husband. There are countless amount of these stories of low-income families from a wide variety of backgrounds and ethnicities and social climates that highlight that the food bank extends beyond the provision of food and sanitary ware, and also becomes or is a gateway for people in the community to access support for their basic needs, for their mental health, and even things like housing. The pandemic has highlighted the strain on people's lives, and a subsequent lockdown. In the subsequent lockdown, we saw queues of people outside of the church line up for food. We responded immediately by increasing our food supplies from our central budget. We mobilized volunteers and utilized the resources that we have, like the minibus, to get food to people who are isolated. We continue to deliver food weekly, and we have diversified our food sources through the Haringey Food Network, and we've secured vital funding with the support of Vaz from the Bridge Renewal Trust, who truly is worth her weight in gold. We want to see our community thrive, and to this end, we look to increase partnership working and co-production as we, as a church and as a community hub, look to further develop our IAG capacity in terms of providing information, advice and guidance, those who use the food bank, to create a befriending and listening service that actually we are listening to people and engaging with them so that they don't get into crisis. We're looking to mobilize our resources in terms of counsellors that we have on site, and also to promote positive relationships and mental and health well-being through activities like a cycling club. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much, Vaz.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like to thank all of our speakers and hand back over to Pippa Connor, if I may.
So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Can I please now ask all those speakers to make sure your cameras and microphones are off, just to maintain the quality of this meeting, and we'll now start the debate. So members, I've got a list of members here, and I'll call Councillor Des Nevis. So can you make sure your camera and microphone's on, and those members who know they're speaking, please be ready so we can try and make up some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. And firstly, thanks to those speakers for their witness and testimony around their most important work in the community. I think it chimes with us, and we all understand deeply the things that our community has been going through. I spoke last night with a friend who's been having trouble sleeping, and in advance of coming to this debate, I was reflecting on all the many things that are causing the anxiety and disquiet that can lead and evolve into mental health. And I was thinking about those who have lost a loved one and who can't mark that bereavement in normal or proper ways, of the unending battle that people are having with their physical illness, be it long COVID or otherwise, with the dragging loneliness and isolation that many are feeling, and their worries around redundancy, income and poverty. So it's no wonder that twice as many people are now reporting experiencing depression. And I read that there's a recent survey from the charity Mind that tells us that half of adults and 2/3 of young people are reporting that their mental health is worse than it was before lockdown 1. So the loss of the most ordinary shared experiences and those things that our community groups have just so well presented are helping supplement. But those losses have really affected all of us and the whole country and beyond, in fact. But we know we can heal, and we know that some things are good for us. And that same Mind survey reported that friends and family were a key way of helping people through these difficulties that they're facing and the challenges to their mental well-being. And we've seen in our community, as our organisations here tonight have strongly represented, that through mutual aid, the voluntary sector, through food projects, and that our community has supported itself and been able to create new friendships and also networks of support. But it's now time for our national government to put mental well-being at the heart of strategies to support individuals, communities and local authorities. And we in the council must set ourselves on a path to recovery that is holistic, recognising the interactions between physical and mental health and poverty and inequality, and also the role of the built environment in those things. We must ask ourselves how what we do as a council can contribute to sustainable livelihoods, to physical health and to mental well-being. And we must keep in check and question the things that, rather than supporting well-being, might instead erode health, erode resilience and erode strength. Our challenge is surely to ask ourselves how we in this room can take actions and decisions that will positively enhance the mental well-being of all our residents, especially our young people and others who are disproportionately affected by the pandemic and its aftershocks.
Councillor Des Nevis. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So one night this August, away on a family holiday, I found myself sitting on a completely deserted beach, truly alone for the first time in months, and I cried. And I mean, I properly cried, because like everybody else, I'd found that the last 7 months were extraordinarily challenging. I was completely unprepared with juggling homeschooling and a demanding job, whilst not leaving the house for days at a time, and constantly hearing the news of the death tolls continually rising. My 8-year-old did not see another child for months, so to try and keep his spirits up, we started a list of all the countries that we were going to visit when it was all over. And every morning he'd bound in, eyes bright, asking if the virus was over yet. Could we go see his beloved grandparents, or could we start our world tour? And every morning we had to disappoint him. And to see the impact on a young child, not being able to see anyone that he loved, not to touch, hug, or even kick a ball around with them, was absolutely heartbreaking. My brother is also paralysed from the neck down, and COVID put his life in danger. And it left my family worrying constantly about his care. We were unable to give him the support that we normally would, and we didn't know if or when we would ever see him face to face again. And like all of you, I was hearing from residents who were frightened, struggling and alone, looking for someone to help or reassure them. And it became overwhelming. And then, like thousands of others, my job and that of many of my colleagues and my own team disappeared. In the hope that I could somehow make everything go away, I started to avoid the news and social media, but I still spent most nights unable to sleep and dealing with anxiety attacks. And of course, there were many, many people in even worse situations than I, and so I was utterly ashamed that I felt the way that I did. And I've given much of my career to help other people in this same situation, but for months I found that I wasn't able to ask anybody for help. And after that night on the beach, I finally realised that I wasn't okay, that I wasn't coping. And so I did start to reach out to some friends and family about how I was feeling. And their kindness, support and love has helped me enormously over the last few weeks. Talking about mental health is still taboo for so many people. People like me who feel that they should be coping and don't feel that they can reach out. I didn't look unwell. I wasn't wearing a t-shirt that said, I'm not okay. So how would anybody know that I needed help? And as counsellors, we have an important role to play in supporting our communities, supporting mental health charities, raising awareness and lobbying government for more investment into mental health services locally and nationally. None of us really knows what will happen next. But we do know that more than ever, we must be kind to those around us and ourselves. So I just want to ask you to look out for your family, your friends, your colleagues. If you think that somebody needs help, to encourage them to seek it. And reach out to somebody if you need to. You don't have to go through this on your own. I've learned myself that it's okay not to feel strong or brave every day. It's simply okay not to be okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Vavazon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd really just like to say I think a lot of these contributions have been incredibly moving and have raised all sorts of issues that we need to seriously reconsider how we approach life and the world after this pandemic. I started my own thoughts by seeing if I could find some statistics. I only found one that I think is really, I found an article in the Lancet from July 2020, which said in summary that no surprises, that there have been huge increases in the levels of mental distress and huge increases in mental ill health and distress amongst the 18 to 24-year-olds, the 25 to 34-year-olds, in women and people who look after children. And of course we know that there's already people who have got mental health problems that would have been exacerbated during this crisis, and people of course who have lost their jobs, about which Tammy just spoke so eloquently. The question that comes really, when you think about it, as no surprise. This pandemic has changed the world. It will change the world, and it's changed how we should see, how we need to see the world and what we can do. So the question that I've been thinking about is, what are we going to do? Because life is unlikely to what we always thought was normal. And our own behaviour has changed. We see people who are fearful, anxious, worried, who have lost many of their anchors. So I want to talk about, and following on from what Lucia touched on, is what we as a local authority should be doing and how we harness our resources as a council. We've heard from the voluntary groups, we've heard about the partnership working, but as local authority we are able to make our own, and we must make our own significant contribution. And we have to think how we target our money. So if we take just a few areas, we know that women with very young children have also really experienced enormous problems in this pandemic and are unable to kids to go out. And we heard about the Somalian group, for example, at Selby. But we have wonderful facilities, and our children's centres, which we need to cherish and we need to make sure endure and are open and functioning. And if necessary, we need to think how we expand them in order to meet the needs of the families that we've just talked about, so that the children with disabilities get our Rolls-Royce services, which we know exist in our children's centres, for example. That's why we need to invest in our young people, so that we have holiday programmes. It is a tragedy that our own provision that we used to run, 1,000 children a day in the holidays, was cut. And this should provide an opportunity for us to rethink what we do with our resources. I can see the Mayor is looking at me, so I will stop there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Babazon. Councillor Da Costa.
Colleagues, talking about mental health should be easy. It shouldn't be that hard, and it should not be difficult to say, I need help. Yet it is not easy, it is hard, and it is difficult to say, I need help. When it came to writing this speech, I found it very difficult. I struggled because I was worried what people would think of me talking about my own experiences with mental ill health, and I know that I will struggle in this speech. To quote a line from the film Joker, which might seem strange now, but the worst part about having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't. I have severe depression and anxiety disorders. I have an eating disorder. I've tried to kill myself in the past more than once, and I have self-harmed. Lockdown has been emotionally destructive. I know I've been lucky. People out there have lost loved ones, and people's livelihoods have been extremely impacted. I powered through the first lockdown because I had no choice. I was lucky. I had a job that meant I could go to work every day. The idea of self-isolation is too emotionally challenging to me. Towards the end of lockdown, when things started to look more positive, I was made redundant, one of many people in the country who lost their jobs as COVID hit. And the emotional and mental crutch of being able to go into an office and interact with people was snatched away. And as lockdown 2 comes along, once again, I find myself back in isolation. Working from home for someone who finds a quiet place a catalyst for emotional struggle is so very impossible. Battling with anxiety and depression is a fight, and it's one that exhausts you. It saps at your energy and removes any ability to fight. My inner demons battle against each other. Some days it gets so bad I cannot get out of bed or even get into bed, and I lay there and watch the hours fade away, not because I'm lazy, but because the act of getting out of bed is just too difficult to face. It feels like there are 1,000 people screaming at you, even though you're in an empty apartment. And I end up cutting myself off from people, not because I want to be alone, but because talking to people is too emotionally exhausting. I'm lucky that people around me want to help, but the challenge with mental ill health is that we need to let people help us, and we need to continue fighting the stigma. And the challenge with the current mental health system is that you end up repeating your same stories hundreds of times before you actually get any help, and that becomes too exhausting. As Tammy said, we need to be able to say it is okay not to be okay. And I hope that debates like this at Haringey Council help in breaking down those stigmas around mental health, and that we as elected representatives share our own personal stories and act as ambassadors by us talking openly and candidly about the struggles that we have. We're able to shed light on mental ill health and make it less taboo to talk about openly. Thank you.
Excellent speech, Nick. Well done.
Thank you very much, Councillor Da Costa. Very powerful words. And good on you for sharing the experiences, because we help other people feel more comfortable to speak out. I'll now call the Cabinet member to respond, and as I indicated earlier, time is tight, so Councillor James, 3 minutes or fewer.
Thank you. I'd like to thank actually all the people who've spoken in this debate so far, both the contributors from the community and voluntary sector and councillors as well. I think it's been a very useful debate to highlight the problems in mental health. I think COVID has really highlighted the stark inequalities in our borough in many ways. For example, the differential health impacts that have been recorded amongst Black, Asian and minority ethnic residents, the economic impacts in terms of the number of workers who are furloughed, the number of new universal credit claims, the increase in levels of debt, and the numbers of residents at risk of food and fuel poverty, and the resultant rapid increase in residents using those food banks, as we've already heard this evening. Poverty, overcrowded and poor quality housing, income insecurity, and ill health all impact on an individual's mental health and well-being. On top of this, the lockdowns have left many people feeling socially isolated, so it's not surprising that more people are experiencing mental health difficulties. We've been working with our voluntary community sector and health partners to respond to this through the work of Connected Communities, the Community Engagement Group, Food Network and the Wellbeing Network, just to name a few. During lockdown, many services have been reconfigured, and once lockdown relaxed, face-to-face services resumed wherever possible. Our digital offer includes Kooth, which I wanted to mention in particular because the issues raised already around young people, because it's proved extremely popular way of engaging people, young people up to the age of 25. It's had excellent user feedback, and over half of those users are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. There's also NHS Go and Thrive London as providing really useful online support for people with mental health and wellbeing difficulties. But apart from the digital advice and support, services have responded to the challenges of COVID in a variety of creative ways, some of which we've already heard about this evening. But others just like to highlight also is a new borough primary care service to improve physical health for adults with severe mental illness is being provided by the GP Federation in Mind in Haringey, which is focused on Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups and those at greatest risk in relation to COVID. The Council, Mind and Bridge Renewal Trust and NHS providers have been working together on a borough-based mental health action plan, focusing on improving awareness, information and access to support. There is a new North Central London suicide bereavement service run by Resync, and there's a new dedicated mental health service for people who are rough sleeping. We've worked with our voluntary and community sector partners to develop a community framework for bereavement and loss that brings together the many different strands of our work going on across the borough to help residents struggling with bereavement and loss. We will continue to work in cooperation with our partners to build community resilience and provide support for those who are in need, despite the enormous challenges that we all face. And I think it's right to think that it's causing many of us to reconsider the way we live and what our priorities are. And I think that that's going to have implications for all of us going forward. So once again, I'd like to thank the speakers, Vas Hirani, Raj Gupta, Martin Finnegan and Sonia Cantlebury, for highlighting the issue of mental health and the work that their organisations are doing to support our residents. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking this seriously and for considering the very real impacts on mental health that COVID is having, and not just in terms of the health impacts of COVID, but the social and economic impacts of COVID. And those are going to be with us, unfortunately, as we all know, for a very long time. So thank you very much for this debate and for raising this issue at full council. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Connor, who I hope will be as brief as possible, please. Councillor Connor. Not to curtail this important debate, of course, but...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A huge thank you again to all our speakers tonight. it was a very powerful and moving debate. Amidst the challenges complicated as COVID-19, and we can feel helpless. However, the groups we've heard from tonight show there's a real opportunity if we act to help each individual in our community. Small grassroots organisations are seeded in adversity and grow through helping those with often nowhere else to turn. These organisations, along with many others in Haringey, are the ones tackling the practical needs and facilitating mental health support. So looking forward, we need to look at the steps which we need to take to address these practical problems raised tonight by these voluntary groups. One is there is a new mental health model, it's a new community mental health model, which involves the Bridge Renewal Trust, working alongside Barnet, Enfield and Haringey Mental Health Trust, the CCG, the Council and other partners to co-design a new community health model, mental health model. The aim is to jointly develop a community-based offer, which includes access to psychological therapies, improved physical health care, employment support, personalised and trauma-informed care, medicines management and support for self-harm, coexisting with substance use and proactive work to address racial disparities. However, to achieve this goal, we need to build the capacities of non-specialist community groups, such as those we've heard from today, to offer this early help and prevention to support our residents. The aim then being to avoid initial problems developing into more serious mental health issues which require hospital services. So how can we ensure this practical support for grassroots community groups in order to help them expand and provide their vital support and services? We must recommend tonight that all councillors receive an update on this new community mental health model at a special briefing. This is a unique opportunity to commission services using a community-led approach with a broad range of partners alongside our voluntary groups so that our residents receive the wraparound support that they so desperately need in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Connor, and thank you to all those who contributed to the debate, members-wise, particularly Councillor Costa for his very powerful speech, and also to the guests for coming along this evening. So thank you. And we'll move on to agenda item 12, council questions. And just to update members, as a result of consultation and approval from the two chief whips, the second supplementaries won't be put this evening on the basis of time pressure. So I've accepted the responses to written questions admitted as late business, and we have 6 oral questions from members. So please, can councillors participating in this item be ready to turn on your camera and microphones when I call you? Right. So question 1, Councillor Crawley Harrison to the Leader of the Council.
Does the Leader of the Council accept the findings of the recent EHRC report on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party as the Labour leader Keir Starmer does, and as a result, what does he have to say to Haringey's Jewish community?
I think it's very important to express our solidarity with Haringey's Jewish community. I'm aware that the EHRC report into anti-Semitism addressed the issue that attitudes and behaviours within the Labour Party have made our party an unwelcoming place for Jewish people. I'm very unhappy that we've got into this position, and it's essential that that Labour, my party, have to take the contents of this report seriously. We need to listen, we need to learn, and we need to change. When Labour created the Equality and Human Rights Commission, it was to promote equality, human rights and fairness. And as I've said, I'm deeply saddened to read the findings of this report. One anti-Semite is too many, and I'm confident that ridding the party of anti-Semitism is a key political consideration that the Labour Party has to accept and deliver.
Two. Can I ask Councillor Gunnage to put her question to the Leader of the Council? sorry, excuse me. Leave the opposition. You have a supplementary to the leader. Sorry.
Do you think that Haringey Labour councillors who are on record of saying this historical furore is not really about anti-Semitism, the key aim of this relentless campaign is to kill our movement, and that Chris Williamson had been suspended by Labour for the crime of speaking the truth, Luciana Berger for leaving the party was nothing to do with anti-Semitism, and that they are trying to destroy an innocent and principled comrade to whom we owe so much. If we allow them to succeed, we will be next, either become their slaves or destroyed in relation to Jeremy Corbyn, should remain Haringey Labour councillors.
I wasn't aware that any councillors had made that sort of response to the EHRC report. I think that there's a clear process for people who said and done things that are contrary to party rules, that there's a way that these things are dealt with, but I wasn't aware that anybody had made that particular response to the EHRC report. I think it's really important to say that people of colour stood alongside the Jewish community in the Battle of Cable Street in the 1930s. The Jewish community also stood alongside Black and Asian people at the Battle of Duckett's Common in the 1980s. We will continue to stand in solidarity with the Jewish community against anti-Semitism and all other forms of racism discrimination, and we are continuing to work to ensure that anti-racism is embedded at every level of the party's rules, structures and culture. We have to learn and we have to change. That was the message that came out from the EHRC report.
Thank you, Leader. Question 2, Councillor Gunness to the Leader of the Council. Councillor Gunness, are you there?
Mr. Mayor, I think she's having problems unmuting us. If someone else could unmute her, that would be helpful.
I don't know how to do that.
She has to
unmute herself, I think.
Yes, we can only mute.
We can only mute, we can't unmute. We'll come back to you, Councillor Gunness. Let's go to question 3. Councillor Rossetti to the Cabinet Member for Climate Change, Equalities and Leisure. Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Council is introducing charges to tennis courts that were historically free for all. Given that the new charges risk disproportionately affecting the poorest in our borough, who are already more likely to have limited outdoor play space for their own, and our youngest residents who are at school or studying during the day, will the Cabinet Member honour the commitment made in the 2018 Labour Manifesto to promote our parks and the activities available in them so that even more residents can enjoy them, and reverse this decision so that access to council tennis courts remain free for all residents all of the time? Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hearn.
I hope you can see me.
We can see and hear you. Thank you.
Since 2002, 3 parks, tennis courts in Finsbury Park, Bruce Castle Park and Albert Rec, which are run by external sports organisations, they currently charge. No other tennis courts are charged for in our parks. For some years now, we have agreed fees and charges for the hire of sports facilities across parks. I am concerned that we get the balance right between charging and free play spaces for all our communities. I have therefore asked officers to review all charging for sports courts in all our parks.
Thank you. Councillor Rossetti, supplementary.
None, thank you.
Good. Oh, thank you very much. You win Member of the Night. Councillor Gunness, are you there? Ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, can you hear me?
I can hear and see you. So question 2, would you like to put your question? Okay.
Yes. A motion was passed in July by full council entitled Black Lives Matter. Apologies. Sorry. I lost my text. Sincere apologies, Mayor. A motion was passed in July by full council entitled Black Lives Matter and the impact of COVID-19 on BAME communities, which made a number of requests on the council for action. Can the leader of the council update the councillors on the progress made since? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Leader.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Councillor Ganesh, for this question. And there's a similar question asked in the written questions for which there is an extended reply. This council is committed to tackling the entrenched injustices and inequalities that continue to exist in our borough. In this spirit, we've made significant progress in taking forward many of the important actions highlighted in the motion in July. This includes hosting the Mayor of London in Tottenham for a meeting with Black community leaders to discuss issues related to the disproportionate policing of the Black community by the Met. We've established a partnership coordinating group for addressing racial injustices and discrimination in Haringey. We had a joint meeting with the Community Safety Partnership and the Health and Wellbeing Board to oversee the partnerships work, particularly with regards to COVID. We've also been learning from the Public Health England report, and we are working to address equity of access and equity of treatment in relation to health and other services. And furthermore, we're developing proposals for support, training and mentoring for the council's BAME staff to help them rise to more senior positions.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gunness, I hope you've got your text ready. Supplementary?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got a supplementary question too. Thank you. Can the leader also update members on the progress of the council's review on monuments, building, places and street names in Haringey? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the supplementary as well, Councillor Ganesh. I think that the issue of the Black Lives Matter movement is something that has made a number of people a little bit uncomfortable. I think it's important that we accept that for change for many people is a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes it's a little bit painful, but if we don't act on the moment set up by the Black Lives Matter movement, there will be no change and the momentum of the movement will be lost. Consequently, the council has actively consulted on two particular changes. One is around the renaming of Black Boy Lane. The other is about the renaming of Albert Road Rec and naming that after the anti-apartheid campaigner Oliver Tambo. We're proud that we're leading the way and we're one of the first councils in the country to take these steps. No established process for doing this has happened, and the last time that the council changed the name of a road was over 50 years ago. However, we will continue to listen to residents about the effect and inconvenience that any of these changes might make for them. And we're going to embark on the next stage of this, including the statutory consultation when the time is right. Ultimately, the decision will be taken by councillors and the committee, but I hope the names changes can be agreed, because the reality is that the name Black Boy Lane offends and upsets many people, and in my view has no place in the Haringey of 2020. Furthermore, the public consultation around the renaming of Albert Road Rec after Oliver Tambo is still open, and we are hoping that residents will continue to have make their views known upon that.
Thank you, Leader. Question 4, Councillor Say, to put the question to the Cabinet Member for Transformation of the Public Realm, who has got her camera on already. Very good. Councillor Say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Councillor Yvonne Say from Bounds Green Ward. How is the council ensuring that those with no recourse to public funds are able to access the Test and Trace Support Fund?
Thank you, Councillor Say. So I think this is a really important question. Thank you very much for asking it. The government's Test and Trace Fund is for people who are deemed as low income and have been asked, like the PM, to self-isolate. And low income is defined and evidenced through a range of benefit entitlements, i.e. working tax credits or income support. And we've been given £300,000 to distribute this fund, and that's enough for only 600 people at £500 each per resident. So far, 84 residents have been awarded, and we've spent £42,000. However, as you can tell, you cannot apply for the main fund because you can't be entitled to these benefits if you're no recourse to public funds. So in addition to the main fund, we also have a discretionary fund, and this covers no public recourse to funds and various other circumstances where people don't fit into the main fund. This is only funded to the tune of 90,000. So far, as of the 14th, 66 people have benefited from the discretionary fund, and we haven't. There's not a £500 blanket. It's up to not exceeding £400. So there's been a total of £18,000 spent, but they've been a bit different, and that's how we're assisting people with no recourse to public funds. You're on mute, Chair.
And thank you. Yes, it's because there are two other people in the room, and it's easier to be on mute. Not anyway. Right. Thank you. Question 5, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the Cabinet Member for Housing and Estate Renewal. I wrote to the Cabinet Member for Housing and the Chief Executive of Homes for Haringey on the 8th of October, asking them to immediately halt any proceedings relating to the very complex maintenance work on the leasehold properties in Knoll Park, which has seen some properties receiving advance notice bills for over £100,000. This email was neither acknowledged nor replied to, and so I'm going to ask again, will the Cabinet Member initiate an immediate halt to these works and any associated proceedings to allow adequate time for all parties to seek advice and properly engage with one another through a full and possibly extended consultation period given these complexities?
Okay, and just to say, the Leader of the Council will be responding.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barnes. As you might be aware, that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Estate Renewal declared a personal interest in this matter and won't be responding to any questions about it. Furthermore, earlier on, there was a deputation that came and expressed a number of the residents and leaseholders' concerns. And as I've said, a number of these things that we've heard, we understand, but we are we have to move forward with the major works program, because the reality is that the work around the pods should have been done many years ago. We come to a solution that can quickly and easily replace the pods by building them off site and by effectively just lifting them over the building. This can be done with 1 day's discomfort and inconvenience for residents, rather than if we have a brick built process, which is effectively 3 months of inconvenience with residents having to move out of their home. I also have on more than one occasion apologised on behalf of the council and on behalf of Homes for Haringey for the rather unsympathetic letter which initially went out to residents, which could have been read as a request for payments. However, you know, as it's been said before, it wasn't a bill nor a demand for payment, but it was a poorly written letter which was open to misinterpretation. We are going to be taking a decision at some time very soon, probably at the Cabinet coming up. I have already said to the residents, the leaseholders before, that we will seek to have the opportunity to have a conversation with them before we get there. I think, it's important to understand that this is a bit of work that is desperately outstanding and desperately needed. And obviously we're talking about not just 76 leaseholders, but 140 plus tenants as well. So, you know, there are a lot of people who are impacted by this, and as a council, these properties they've been let to, they haven't been looked after in the way that they should. However, we as an administration have been committed to investing in our housing, and now is the opportunity for us to do so.
Thank you. Do I get a supplementary, Adam?
Yes, if you're quick.
Go ahead.
If we're really quick, you get a supplementary.
I just wanted to follow up and ask, does that therefore mean that you're saying that the council is culpable because it failed to act many years ago in the maintenance of these properties?
Good try, Councillor Barnes, but no, that's not what I was saying.
Question number 6, Councillor Moyed.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is to the Cabinet Member for Adults and Health. An estimated 4.5 million people in the UK have become unpaid carers as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is on top of the 9.1 million unpaid carers who were already caring before the outbreak, bringing the total to 13.6 million. What is the council doing to support the increasing number of Haringey residents who spend a large part of their lives providing unpaid support to family or friends?
Cabinet Member.
Thank you. We've recently launched a new 3-year strategy to support unpaid carers across Haringey. I think you're largely, in response to your question, it's been recognised as an area of real need, not just because of COVID, but before COVID. So we actually began working on that strategy. I think at the end of last year, we had a big meeting in George Meehan House shortly before the lockdown, which was attended by, I think, about 60-70 people. The launch of the strategy unfortunately had to take place online, but again had similar numbers of people there. The strategy for adult carers has been co-designed and co-produced with carers, with input from statutory partners and the voluntary and community sector as well. It means that service providers right across the borough have signed up to it, which I think is a really important step. It demonstrates our commitment to carers and seeks to respond to local issues, outlining how everyone across the system is working together to improve the lives of carers and those that they care for. Our mission is to ensure that anyone who provides unpaid care and support to someone else is able to, first of all, identify that they are a carer. And that may sound strange, but very often people do an awful lot of caring and don't recognise that role in themselves. They should be listened to regarding the care provided for the person who they are looking after or supporting. They should be seen as experts and actively engaged in the caring role. They should be supported to continue to be a carer, and importantly, they should be supported to have a life of their own and to maintain and to improve their own health and well-being. They should be provided with helpful information, advice and guidance. These were the key findings that came out of that co-produced strategy, which we'll be working on to make sure that they're implemented going into the future and working with our partners. The strategy will be implemented through an action plan, which is also being co-produced with carers and partners, and we'll be actively reviewing that.
I'm sorry, Cabinet Member. I thank you. I'll have to stop you there. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. Item 13. Now,
Mayor, I have a supplementary question.
Oh, excuse me. You're quite right. Yes, you do. Sorry, Councillor Moyed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So my supplementary question is: this Tory government has pronounced that our residents who just a few months ago were advised to shield should, during the second national lockdown, be left to fend for themselves. So what support is this council offering to carers who are looking after or indeed are themselves clinically vulnerable or extremely vulnerable during this difficult time? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Haringey has approximately 10,000 clinically extremely vulnerable residents. Since the reintroduction of national measures and second lockdown, Haringey Council has been making contact with these residents to ensure that they have the support they and their carers need to follow the latest clinical guidance. This follows the support offered over the summer, where advice, guidance and support was given to households, including those with clinically extremely vulnerable members, and helped for them to make a plan for a return to stricter measures. So we've already got a lot of foundation work has already been done for this. These conversations include support and planning around access to food, to medication, to money, caring responsibilities and communication needs, health and well-being, including our library home service, connection service, online support and mutual aid. We've contacted all the clinically extremely vulnerable for whom we have either a mobile number or an email address. For those who we only have a landline number for, we will be contacting them in the coming week. If we know of them already, if they're in receipt of food parcels, for example, during the first lockdown, or they've received support from Connected Communities since March 2020. We continue.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. These are really important issues, but we do have to
yes,
move on.
Yes, I'd just like to finish the point because I think it's an important one. People are really concerned about it.
I'm fully aware of that, but we're mindful of timing. So one sentence, please.
Yep, we continue to contact all the residents who register themselves or someone they're caring for on the National Shielding Service website, and we will proactively contact the remaining residents who are clinically extremely vulnerable, for whom we only have a landline, over the coming week. Additionally, Connected Communities continues to offer support. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, item 13. We have two motions to consider this evening, and I'm very mindful of timings. So there will be a slight variation in terms of numbers of people who will be able to be called, but that is the nature of the game. Now, I'm going to call the leader, and I hope the leader will indulge members by using as little time as possible, mindful of the fact that there is no amendment to this motion. So there is broadly unanimity of view, clearly, otherwise I suspect there would be amendments. Anyway, I'll go to the leader, and if the Deputy Leader of the Council will be minded to be as brief as possible, that would be appreciated too. So, Council Leader, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have to say this is the first time I've tabled a motion criticising the Tory government, and done so with a heavy heart. To be honest, I wish I didn't have to table this. All that this council, all that indeed every Labour council actually wants is for Johnson, Jenrick and Sunak to keep their word and fund us properly. 8 months ago, as we moved into lockdown, the government promised to fully recompense local councils for the money that they needed to spend, that we needed to spend to protect and support our residents. From the moment we did so, managing to protect our residents, they started to backslide on that commitment. It started off to 95% of what we spent, and it was 75% of 95% of what we spent. We've been protecting our residents from COVID, providing new commitments and the changes that we need to bring the services that were delivered to our residents. We've suffered further loss of income, reductions in collection of business rate, council tax and rents. These have all put a huge dent in our budget, as did with many other authorities, with indeed one council, Croydon, issuing a Section 114 notice. There are 8 specific asks within the motion. Now, I'm quite happy not to talk to these in any great detail. I'm aware that there'll be other councillors coming forward who will specifically talk about the vulnerable residents and how we need to protect them, incomes and employment, and also talking about the greater support for businesses. I also think it's important to point out that the councils have an enforcement role in ensuring that people keep to the law. I dare say many of you are aware that the council's already been seeking to persuade a gym owner in Wood Green that when the national regulations say that this business has to close, that there isn't a Wood Green exception. But again, this is another situation where the council has been left with responsibilities without the funding in order to make that true. I'm pleased that this would appear to be a motion upon which this council can unite, but just agreeing amongst ourselves is not going to be the solution. I'll happily write to the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Secretary of State, but we must all use all of the influence that as councillors that we have in this admittedly virtual chamber in order to press our national and regional politicians, support his community groups, unions, residents to make this tin-eared government listen and ensure that Haringey Council can continue to fully support Haringey residents.
Thank you very much, Leader. Councillor Amin, you have, well, you're seconding. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to second this motion. I absolutely agree with the leader. The government's response to the COVID-19 crisis has been characterised by incompetence and complete lack of leadership. The government has overseen a catalogue of errors and from going against the advice of its own scientific advisors and refusing to implement an urgent circuit breakdown lockdown to their own failure to deliver effective testing and tracing and refusing to support us on free school meals. The government has endangered the lives and livelihoods of every Haringey resident. People in Haringey across the country have played their part, and in Haringey, a whole number of mutual aid groups, not all called mutual aid groups, but they all played an extraordinary role in helping to support our residents. And it's unacceptable that residents have made such incredible sacrifices while the government itself has been willing to do so little and not even ensuring that lockdown restrictions apply to its own advisors. The national government's inaction and their failure to learn from the first wave and their failure to listen to the needs of the citizens have forced well-equipped and less well-funded organisations, institutions and individuals to step up. We've all been let down badly, and the time for the government to step up and take responsibility is well overdue. I would hope that we all support this motion because it's actually a really important motion to demand that the government takes responsibility for its role in supporting residents through this public crisis.
Thank you, Councillor Amin. That's very good. Appreciate that. Now, obviously colleagues can see the time, so I don't need to make the point about 30 minutes, but what I do want to highlight is brevity is now order of the evening. I call on the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Colley-Howson.
Thank you, Chair. In the interests of time, I won't be making my speech and none of my councillor colleagues will either, but we wholeheartedly support this motion and I would be more than happy to add my name to the Leader of the Council's letter, or we will write our own letter in support if preferred. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader of the Opposition. Appreciated. On that basis, Councillor Mitchell, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will also be brief. I think in contrast to the government's shambolic response on COVID, we've seen local authorities performing a vital role in supporting their communities. And I want to thank the Haringey staff for their tremendous efforts. And I also want to thank the huge number of local volunteers who've stepped up to help those most in need. Recent months have shown how people come together when times are tough. The then local government minister said that councils were at the forefront of the national effort, and he called those working in local government the unsung heroes of the fight against COVID. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised that the government hasn't stuck to its word on funding. London councils have called for an additional 1.4 billion to compensate for the financial impact of the pandemic, and that was before the second lockdown. And the government seems to be able to find the money when it wants to. 12 billion on a private sector test and trace system that doesn't work. A further 10 billion awarded to without competitive tender, often to companies with links to the Tory party. And we need funding to support public health services, address the demand pressures on key services, tackle homelessness, rebuild local economies, and so that councils can take a lead in addressing the stark inequalities that the pandemic has exposed. So I hope we can all support this motion and add Haringey's voice to the call for action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Mr. Mayor.
Chief Whip.
Mr. Mayor, I ask that this motion be now put to the vote.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Motion put. Okay, So we'll now vote on the motion, and I'll ask each political party's chief whip and Councillor Barbara Blake to indicate if their group is in favour, against, or will be abstaining on the motion. Councillor Rice.
Sorry, it occurred to me we hadn't put the amendment.
There's no amendment to this. There's no amendment to this motion, Chief Whip. That's for the next motion.
So do that again.
So, can you please indicate whether your party will be supporting, voting against, or abstaining on this motion, or on its motion, I should say?
Supporting.
Okay, thank you. And I call the opposition Chief Whip.
Supporting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barbara Blake.
Supporting.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. That's unanimity. Always good to see. Thank you very much indeed. The motion is agreed. Now we'll move to motion B in the name of the Liberal Democrats, and I call Councillor Hare to propose the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Experience from almost, I'd like to propose our motion formally. Experience from almost every urban area in London and worldwide is describing how cycling is achieving mobility without the massive costs of all sorts caused by the dominance of vehicles. The Walking and Cycling Commissioner for London lists numerous ways in which increasing cycling will improve the quality of urban living, summarising, our city will be a better place to live, to work, to invest in and to raise children in. I'd like to focus for a moment on children. Cycling brings health and independence. Cycling with parents to a local park means easy and quick access, encouraging use of the parks, but mostly it's too unsafe getting there. As a child, friends and I tore around back streets, cycled to the river to swim or fish, and as an adult, I commuted long distances from South to North London. But Haringey cycling facilities aren't safe for adults, let alone a child of 12 on his or her own. Why shouldn't routes suitable for a 12-year-old be our target? It's no surprise that we see so few children on bikes. It's simply too dangerous for almost any parent to contemplate. Why do we accept that one group of road users, who are not the majority, can deny the use of everyone's streets to another group? Over the last 10 years, traffic in Haringey has risen by a third. That is actually staggering. The combination of high traffic levels and Haringey's poor facilities has led to the borough having the second highest level of casualties among outer London boroughs. Actually, these aren't accidents, they're the direct result of the poor provision of safe facilities. And who is to blame for that? It's this council, and we must do better. In facilities for everyday cycling, the council has achieved little or nothing in 20 years. Currently, roads and environment are split across 3 cabinet member briefs with confusion of responsibility. Does any other council do that? No. Cycling is not mentioned. Why not? The results are apparent on the ground. Yet there is huge demand for cycling, as shown by the large increase during the first lockdown. The decrease as traffic levels have risen post-lockdown tells the story that high levels of traffic and consequent unsafe conditions are the problem. It must be of concern to everyone here that Haringey is conspicuously lagging behind our neighbours. Routes from neighbouring boroughs, north, south and east, come up to the Haringey boundary and, yes, stop. In a recent opinion piece in the Hammond High, Haringey cyclists Jim Busher said he does not think the active travel funding Haringey was awarded was spent wisely. He said, why is Haringey doing so little compared to neighbouring boroughs, including Hackney, Islington and Enfield? Why are Haringey's leaders stuck in the old ways that keep residents dependent on cars and active travel only for the fit and foolhardy? In contrast to our neighbours, Haringey does not yet have a low traffic neighbourhood. Yet we all know that the social costs of car ownership impact most on lowest income households. And when you hear that cars are essential, government data shows that 89% of driving commuters drive alone, with an average vehicle occupancy of 1.1. 40% of all urban car journeys are under 2 miles. Now, I'd like to focus on 3 points from our motion. Safe infrastructure. Firstly, most of the infrastructure installed with government grants does not meet the standards that the government sets. Orcas are widely used, but parking still occurs. And for cyclists, a vehicle in the cycle lane means not only do you have to look behind you to check traffic before you move
Councillor
out.
Hare, I'm sorry. I'm enjoying listening to you, but
okay.
I have to stop you there.
I'm so sorry.
To hear you mentioned Jim Busher, one of my constituents, but I will thank you for your speech, and I will move to Councillor Ross to second the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to formally second the motion. I don't think I can improve on the first paragraph of our motion, giving reasons to promote cycling in the borough. It improves mental and physical health, it frees up space on public transport, it reduces pollution, and it makes London a better city. As reporter Anna Halligan said on BBC Radio 4 on Saturday, we must figure out how to wean people off the motor car and onto bikes. I want to see a change in the priorities that rule our roads along the lines of what happens in the Netherlands and elsewhere. The Dutch cycling culture prioritises people who choose to cycle. In the 1960s, the Dutch capital was one of the most dangerous in the world when considering fatal or near fatal accidents. In the last 50 years, they have changed the way they think about using their roads. In general, Dutch society accepts that on the road, pedestrians take priority over cyclists. Cyclists should have priority over public transport. Buses have priority over roads, and lorries should give way to smaller vehicles. And of course, everyone gives way to trams. That should be an aspiration and an inspiration to us, and this motion goes a small way in that direction. I urge all councillors to support it unamended, apart from the spelling of the word principle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ross. Now, we have received an amendment, and I call Councillor White with a couple of minutes to move the amendment, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try not to use all of those minutes. I do have a 5-minute speech prepared, but obviously I'm not going to use that 5 minutes. Pretty much, I mean, I just wanted to thank the Liberal Democrats for bringing a motion on this important subject. I very much agree that we've got a huge amount that we need to do. And I, as the responsible cabinet member, and this administration as set out in our borough plan, are committed to doing that. The motion has to be amended for a couple of reasons. One, it completely fails to set out all the stuff this administration has already done and is already doing, and that is set out in the amendment. I won't go through that. The other thing is it commits us to doing stuff that we're just not able to resource at the moment. We're currently entirely reliant on external funding, and we're entirely reliant therefore on what external funders want to fund. We're moving to change that situation. We're planning to bring proposals in the capital programme to next cabinet in December, where we're going to invest money in this infrastructure, but currently we're still suffering the cuts to our budget that were pretty much started by the coalition government, in which our Lib Dem colleagues participated. So I'd just like to propose I've got more to say, but I obviously don't have time. So please support the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And can I just remind colleagues to please keep their microphones and their cameras off if they're not speaking. I'm sorry you're stuck with having to look at me. Now, we have got Councillor Stone to second the amendment.
Yep, due to time constraints, I'm happy to just formally second it.
You need to, Chair, because it's not 10 o'clock yet.
I hear you.
10 o'clock yet. We need to we would have to do because it's not reached 10, so we need to still have a bit more time to reach 10 to then do right.
Oh, I see.
So it would be if you want someone else to, you can call Councillor Morris to speak.
The bizarre nature of council standing orders means that at 10 o'clock we have to suspend it for a couple of minutes to make sure we have to will be on the last item to allow us to do the vote and the right of reply, but we need to fill the time between now and 10 o'clock. So, Councillor Stone, if you want to give your...
Mr. Mayor, I believe I have to sum up at the end.
Yes, but we have to wait till 10 o'clock for you to do that, Councillor Hare. I'm being advised by officers here, so that's why I'm listening. Councillor Stone, would you like to actually make a speech? You can if you wish.
I don't have a lot to say. Matt was going to set out the full sort of rationale for the amendment. Other than to say, as Matt has pointed out, that we're severely constrained by our funding coming from externally. Yeah, I completely agree with Matt's sympathy that these are all things we want to see happen. We have to be, unfortunately, realistic about where that money comes from, take stock of what we've done, and I think the amendment sets out sensibly and clearly where we're making progress and how we plan to make further progress as things move on. I'll finish there, if that's okay. There was a further speaker, I think, on the amendment.
Yeah, so Councillor Morris, are you there?
I am here, but you only get my voice this evening because my camera's not working, I'm afraid.
That's okay, Councillor Morris.
So what would you like me to do? Am I going to do my whole speech, which is about 2.5 minutes?
If you don't mind shaving it down to 2 minutes, that would be super.
Okay, lovely. So I'm a cycling newbie. Like many people during the first COVID lockdown, I dusted down my own bicycle that hadn't been used for years and started to cycle, enjoying the car-free roads in beautiful weather. Then after lockdown, I continued to use my bicycle, a most efficient way to get round the ward, I realised, and I started to replace my car journeys with cycling too. However, I learned there are a number of barriers to taking up cycling. However, the biggest barrier was road safety, which I experienced after lockdown when all the traffic returns. It seems that some cars like to overtake at speed and then screech to a halt right in front of you because they've just found that parking space they were looking for. I've been cut up as vehicles turn left onto side streets and almost knocked off my bike as vehicles overtake far too close with oncoming traffic. It comes as no surprise to me that cycle deaths have increased in Haringey by 17%. Sadly, this means that I cannot encourage my 2 teenage daughters to cycle because as the 2 most precious things in my life, cycling in Haringey isn't safe enough for them. And that is why this motion is so important. This council has to make roads safer for all cyclists, young and old, experienced and less experienced, as well as cyclists who commute, deliver, or who cycle for pleasure. That means proper segregation on all cycle routes that join together because we know isolated stretches are of little value, and routes that are direct and intuitive. And we must be ambitious, which is why our motion resolves to increase segregated cycle lanes by 30% in the next 30 years. For me, this is the litmus test as to whether Haringey is an ambitious cycling borough, when I will feel confident that my daughters and children across Haringey will be safe cycling in our borough. Unfortunately, the amendments to our motion by the Labour group send a strong message that Haringey is not an ambitious cycling borough, with targets watered down, too many caveats, and making us wait once again for another elusive action plan. I hope colleagues across the floor agree that this is not good enough and will support this motion unamended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Now, colleagues will know, probably with some eagerness, that it's 10 o'clock and the meeting should now draw to a close. I have, you'll all be pleased to know, discretion to extend the meeting beyond 10 p.m. to conclude the current item in accordance with Council Standing Order 8.1. And for clarity, that means that the relevant councillor who moved the report or substantive motion shall have a right of reply before the motion or amendment is put to the vote. No other right of reply is allowed. Councillor Hare, the floor is yours for as brief as possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, given the huge amount of money that Haringey has received and boasted, the Cabinet member boasted that we have one of the highest settlements in London, the the poor results of the spending of that money are extremely disappointing. And the 20 years that I mentioned where little has been done spans, I think, a number of different governments. But I think that our motion was extremely detailed, and some of the amendments, parts of the amendment don't actually change it very much, but some of the parts do, and that does reflect a lack of willingness to accept what the problems that we have, and it's a little bit like Mr. Trump not accepting the results of the US election. So I think we need to do better. We do need to work to get good quality cycling from north to south for the boroughs that are north of us, where currently routes end at the borough boundary, and southwards. And I think for our residents internally, the 15-minute city is a very important target, and that will only be achieved.
Thank you, Councillor Hare. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to silence you. That wasn't me.
I'm trying to put you on someone's. I didn't do.
Okay. Now, I propose the question. Well, sorry. Let's move to vote on the amendment. Can I ask each political party's chief whip to indicate if their group is in favour, against, or abstaining on the proposed amendment to this motion? I will then ask Councillor Barbara Blake. Councillor Rice, how is your party group voting?
We're voting for the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Opposition, Chief Whip?
We're voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Barbara Blake?
Voting in favour of the amendment.
Thank you very much indeed. The motion, sorry, excuse me, the amendment is agreed in accordance with, do I have a copy of the motion? The motion is agreed to. So let's move to the amended motion, which reads, I don't need to read the whole thing. Oh, I need to read the whole thing. Okay, so amended motion. Council notes that the Walking and Cycling Commissioner for London has stated that more people cycling frees up space on overcrowded buses and trains. It makes our air cleaner. It gives everyone the chance to get around London quickly and affordably. It improves our mental and physical health. It makes our high streets and public places more vibrant. Making it easier to cycle means our city will be a better place to live, to work, to invest in, and to raise children in. 2, that data from TfL shows that prior to the spring lockdown, there were an average 4.6 million daily car trips in London. And of these, 35%, 1.6 million, were journeys of under 2 kilometres or 1.2 miles. 3, this is very long. I think constitutionally the mayor is required to read it out, but I've just realised it's 2.5 pages. So you'll have to bear with me. That a survey of 16,923 residents across 12 UK cities by NatSen found that 28% do not cycle but would like to. This number rose to 55% amongst people from ethnic minority groups, 38% for people at risk of deprivation, 36% for women, and 31% for people with disabilities. And the safety concerns were particularly acute amongst these groups. 4, that between February and June of this year, the distance travelled by Lime electric bikes increased by 129% across London, and by 253% on roads where new bike lanes, I suspect that should say, were constructed during the COVID-19 pandemic. That TfL records show that in 2019 there were 126 cyclist casualties on roads in Haringey, a 17% increase on the previous year, and the second highest number across all outer London boroughs. 6, that the council's LIP concedes that the borough lacks a coherent cycle network, reducing the ability for people to partake in active travel. 7, that DFT guidance on cycle infrastructure design says that light segregation adds some protection to a mandatory cycle lane. It can be installed relatively cheaply, for example, when routine maintenance and general highway improvements are being carried out. 8, that since April 2020, The Council has utilised funding from the Department for Transport to improve the safety of existing cycle lanes in the borough. 9. That the Council's Good Economy Recovery Action Plan, published in August 2020, has committed the Council to explore a 15-minute city approach where residents have the facilities, shops and services they need within walking distance. 10. That the Council is looking for ways to invest our own capital money into walking and cycling infrastructure in this and future financial years, and plan on bringing proposals to that effect to the next Cabinet alongside the Council's wider budget proposals. 11. That the vehicle miles travelled on Haringey's roads has increased by a third since 2010. Reading as fast as possible. Council notes: 1. That a modal shift towards cycling, along with other forms of active travel, has enormous potential to improve the well-being of Haringey residents, improve the borough's air quality and reduce the number of vehicles on the borough's roads. That these benefits not only accrue to cyclists but to the community as a whole. 3. That as a local authority, Haringey should do all it can to promote walking and cycling for the following reasons. A. There is clear evidence that segregated routes lead to significant reductions in deaths and serious injuries. B. The impact of obesity and inactivity leads to its own epidemic of disease. C. The fact that road pollution is the principal source in the capital of toxic air that causes the early deaths of thousands of Londoners every year. D. The impact of reducing climate change. E. The negative impact of people being unwilling to spend time outside in heavily trafficked neighbourhoods. 4. That Haringey has delivered a range of improvements to existing cycleways in the borough to improve the safety for cyclists and pedestrians. The Council continues to pursue funding opportunities internally and externally to deliver new routes which will continue to increase cycling rates in the borough. A number of issues prevent many of the borough's residents from cycling despite their wish to do so. It seems likely that this will be especially so for people from the groups mentioned in Council Notes 3. That there must be a fresh focus on ensuring that any Haringey resident who wants to cycle, who want to cycle and are safe doing so. Council thankfully resolves to 1. Subject to funding and agreement and engagement with relevant stakeholders and residents, roll out temporary cycle lanes on main roads in accordance with the priority routes as set out in the draft walking and cycling action plan, so as to ensure the safe movement of people during the current COVID-19 pandemic. 2. To increase the provision of segregated cycle lane in the borough year on year for the next 3 years, to be further detailed in the draft emerging walking and cycling action plan. 3. That all future cycle routes in the borough should abide by the key decision principles set out in the DFT's Gear Change, a bold vision for cycling and walking. That, where possible, A. Cyclists must be separated from volume traffic both at junctions and on the stretches of roads between them. Cyclists must be separated from pedestrians. Cyclists must be treated as vehicles, not pedestrians. Routes must join together. Isolated stretches of good provision are of little value. Routes must feel direct, logical, and be intuitively understandable by all road users. F. Routes and schemes must take account of how users actually behave. G. Purely cosmetic alterations should be avoided. Routes should be Routes should be designed only by those who have experienced the road on a cycle. 4. As many future cycle routes as possible in the borough must be properly segregated from motor traffic. 5. To expand the existing transport forum to include cycling projects involving cycling professionals and organisations that would be consulted in an official capacity on all future cycling infrastructure, with any recommendations of the panel incorporated into infrastructure designs. 6. To strengthen our outreach to include groups that have traditionally cycled less, to ensure the Council is making effective efforts to increase their access to cycling through training, access to equipment and facilities, signposting to safe routes, etc., so that behavioural change is encouraged with all residents, not just those predisposed to cycling. Examples of the Council's existing outreach projects include A. The Green Wheels project, created to engage with the local community and give local residents the opportunity to learn key skills in bicycle maintenance, safety skills riding on public roads, and participating in cycle rides to aid health and well-being. B, living under one sun, providing cycling and walking activities in Tottenham. C, the Markfield Project, providing structured travel training for up to 7 young people and adults aged 16 plus with learning disabilities and autism. 7, to work with residents, businesses, bike hire providers, other boroughs and/or the Mayor of London to bring a publicly accessible trial bike hire provision to Haringey. 8, that by May 2021, reports should be brought to Cabinet. A, outlining the work the Council is already doing in assessing existing cycle routes to see if they fulfil the standards set out in the resolutions 1 and 2, and relevant cycle route design guidance from TfL and the DFT detailing actions for resolving any identified deficiencies. And B, finally, detailing a plan to reallocate enough road space currently used for motor vehicle parking so that is repurposed for cycle, corrals or bike hangers to ensure that it is as easy to securely park, oh, there's a typo here. I suspect that means park a cycle as a car where feasible. Thank you for your indulgence, colleagues.
Well done.
Mr. Mayor, could you just repeat some of that, please?
Sorry, you are mute.
Oh, no, I'm not. It's a joke. Oh, sorry. Oh, I see. Yeah, I used to like the sound of my own voice, but even I've lost the taste for it now. Anyway, having now read the amended motion in its entirety, I will ask each political party chief whip to indicate how their group will be voting. Councillor Rice.
My group supports the motion as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Ogiho.
Vote for the motion as amended.
Thank you. And Councillor Barbara Blake.
Support the motion as amended.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, colleagues, the motion is agreed, and that brings us to the end of tonight's business. It was a very busy meeting. Thanks to all colleagues for their contributions, and another shout out to Councillor Da Costa for his very moving contribution, and to the others who spoke in the important debate on mental health. And I look forward to seeing you all sometime soon where I'm not speaking so much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Mayor. Good night, council colleagues.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
No.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Mayor, and well done.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Good night, Mr. Mayor.
Good night, Councillor Amin. Cheers.
Bye.